Hi everyone, so we're going to get started now. Welcome to the first of our COVID-19 challenge project showcases. This one is on guidance and new ways of working during the crisis. It's focused on two projects in particular, one that looks at remote work and another one that's looking at digital inclusion. My name's Matt Woodhill. I work at the local digital collaboration unit, which is part of MHCLG. That's the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government. And before we get started properly, a bit of housekeeping. First of all, we are recording this event, so if you have any issues with that, please keep your camera off. We'd ask that throughout you keep yourselves on mute, and any questions that you'd like to ask, please put into the chat function and we'll pick them up. There are going to be 5 minutes after each presentation for questions. If you are presenting and if you're taking part in any of the discussion later, please do turn your camera on at that point so we can see who you are. And so the agenda for the day is we're going to have these two presentations on future work design and from our digital inclusion toolkit project, a couple of updates from some of the other projects that fit within this broad theme, and then we'll be wrapping up around 3 o'clock. So first of all, a bit of background to our work, who we are. The local digital collaboration unit supports the local government sector and council digital and IT teams to work together better. And we do this by providing opportunities for council staff to develop their digital capabilities, by funding and supporting collaborative projects to solve common problems, like some of the ones you're going to hear about today, and by bringing people together to share their work and to learn from each other. And now we're guided by something called the Local Digital Declaration, and I'm not going to go into too much detail because I'm sure many of you here are very familiar with it. If not, you can read about the whole thing in detail at localdigital.gov.uk. The declaration outlines a shared vision for the future of local services, which is based around the 5 key commitments that you can see on the screen at the moment. It's important to emphasise, I think, that it's not a standard, it's not a set of rules, it's something that's aspirational and so better understood as a sort of set of good practices that councils should look to embed along their digital journeys. Further background then, we didn't dream up the declaration by ourselves. It was co-written by 45 founding organisations in 2018, and so far 223 councils have signed the declaration. Signatories to it get access to free training courses and can apply for money through this local digital fund and other things that we run, like the C-19 Challenge Fund. So if you're not already signed up, please visit our website to find out a bit more. Now, this year has clearly been a really challenging time for local government, and we've heard loads of stories about the time and effort being put in by council staff across the country who have in many cases gone above and beyond their usual work to support the health and well-being of their residents. In the summer, we launched the local digital C-19 challenge, which made available £800,000 of funding to councils for COVID-19 related digital innovation projects. The purpose of the fund then was to give money to new or existing work that responded to a pressing need at the time, that could deliver a tangible output within around 2 months, and importantly an output that could be reused by other councils around the country. So in total we actually received 123 applications, and from that we've funded 12 projects in areas that range from things like information sharing to community engagement and designing better working practices. So today's showcase then, one thing that came through in all of the applications was the need, or many of the applications I should say, was the need for more specific guidance in certain areas, 4 particular that stand out. So in how councils support their staff while working from home, both in terms of their well-being and their productivity, and much more besides. Secondly, in terms of how councils engage with their residents when face-to-face contact's no longer possible. And then related to this, how they can continue to support some of their statutory obligations. And in particular, there's one project that we're funding that looks at resident engagement around planning consultations. And then finally, these previous examples all depend on residents having the right digital skills and equipment, but that's not always the case. So how can councils better support digital inclusion at this time as well? So as I've mentioned, we're going to hear from 2 project teams today on future work design and digital inclusion. Up first is the future work design team, which is a project led by East Riding of Yorkshire Council and in partnership with Hull City Council, North Lincolnshire Council, and North East Lincolnshire Council, excuse me, and it's been supported by the University of Hull. And so today we're joined by Becky Colton from Hull City Council and Katie Cunner from the University of Hull. So I'll pass over to you, Becky, if you can start sharing your screen too.
Yeah, hello all, I'm Becky Colton. I'm a Senior Transformation Officer from Hull City Council. Along with me, I've got Katie Cunner.
I'm Katie Cunner and I am a postdoctoral research assistant and psychologist from the University of Hull.
So as Matt's already explained, this was a joint collaboration team made up of the East Riding, Hull City Council, North East Lincolnshire Council, North Lincolnshire Council and our colleagues here alongside us, University of Hull, Centre for Human Factors.
The aim of this work was to gather data around understanding staff experiences of the changes to working practices, so in particular thinking about their well-being and sustainability moving forwards. We wanted to use this data to develop a bespoke tool for measuring the prevalence of the issues with a particular focus on well-being, and to provide local authorities with a qualitative report, accompanying working practice profiles, which I'll explain later, and a PDF survey tool, which can be used by any local authority or indeed any organisation now.
What activities took place? We had 32 focus groups over a period of 5 weeks. These focus groups were made up of functional activities with over 300 staff that took part. Katie will explain a bit more about these groups as part of the working practice profile soon. We also had a corporate management focus group, which was made up of senior leaders from the 4 local authorities.
So we undertook qualitative research in order to build a survey tool. So the qualitative process was 32 audio recorded and transcribed focus groups, which we then thematically analysed, and we used these themes to understand the key areas that needed to be considered moving forwards. Next slide, please, Becky. Thank you. The main themes that were overarching and within which the sub-themes have been arranged were challenges, benefits of working from home particularly, caring for others, management, communications and relationships, digital transformation and hopes for the future. Now, we are publishing a qualitative report that goes into detail about the findings in all of these areas, and you will be able to download that. I'll talk about that in a moment. But for now, Becky's just going to outline a couple of the major highlights, which is the challenges, the benefits and the hopes for the future.
What are some of the challenges that this report has showed us? That there's been threats to well-being, increased workload, back-to-back meetings, long periods of time where staff was taken with no breaks. That social isolation that we usually get in the office, them debriefs, the banter. The barriers to effective working can be that we're not having the right setup, that some of our equipment is going into our family areas within the homes. That loss of commute, that we're not switching off, that we're not having that downtime to reflect between home and work. Unhealthy behaviours, going to the fridge more or not moving away from our desk. Also, them identity as well, about staff wanting to still put a suit and tie on to be on Teams all day, so they remain that identity, but also that we've got staff who are dressing more informally. Some of the benefits that was coming out of this is that staff are liking the choice, that they've got control, empowerment about where, how, when they work, whether that's home, office or another setting. That working flexibly, that being able to work in the evening or weekend, so they can have that work-life balance which suits them with childcare or parental responsibilities. That catalyst for change. Staff are excited about this transformation and then the hopes to move from a culture of presenteeism to a culture of productivity. That reduced commute time, so that during this reduced commute time, staff are able to exercise, spend more time with the family, or put that more time into the work. Productivity, where usually I can have them distractions within the workplace, staff are able to use this time to concentrate on reports, research, and having that quiet time. And then you have the cost savings, not spending money on lunches, childcare, coffees, or not having to buy clothes for the office. But what are some of the hopes for our future, for staff's hopes for the future? And that's blended working. They don't want to be in the office all the time. They don't want to be at home all the time. They want that balance. They want both. They want to be in the office and they want or another location. But equally important is social interaction. That need to have face-to-face interaction with colleagues, but also that we have collaborative workspace that support that, so staff can be innovative and creative. That culture of flexibility and choice, so that they can be trusted to be professional, motivated to do the job remotely. And that we have the systems and policies and approaches in place so that we have that fairness and consistency across all teams. And what are some of the recommendations that come out of this? Boost morale and engagement. Acknowledge that staff want choice, flexibility and trust. Avoid making decisions too soon about staff returning to the office full-time or not until we really understand what stress risk and quantitative data we've got. Boost management skills. Equip our managers to be able to manage staff who are working remotely. Maintain social interaction. Minimise social isolation and maintain existing and develop new relationships. Recognise the importance of informal communications and put in mechanisms in place to enhance these or to have more of them while staff are working remotely. Develop remote working, home-based gardens, and that might be about etiquette during Teams meetings, getting staff to put their hands up, going on mute, or during training, getting staff to engage more. How can we engage staff more training while staff are working remotely? Healthy diary management, break taking, flexible working. Also consider future investigations into impact of changes to working practices. Consider our partners. What impact has this got on our partners? And also harness the opportunity to boost morale. Let's maintain this momentum on this transformation and change journey. But it's so important that we have that well-being at the heart of all our decisions.
So we're just going to move over now to my screen so that I can share the slides. Hopefully that's visible now. So what we did was develop a survey tool from this qualitative data. And the purpose of the survey tool is that every local authority now can take these questions that we've devised that reflect the experiences of participants in this study and understand what this means for their organisation, analyse that data to really understand where the issues might be for you, for your staff. And it actually does constitute an occupational stress risk assessment if you use this tool. So it's aligned with the Health and Safety Executive's approach and recommended approach to managing stress risk in the workplace. And what do we mean by this? So this is something that fits within this paradigm of preventing psychosocial injury at work by maintaining psychosocial safety. So it's actually within a health and safety paradigm. And this is on the basis that actually stress risk is the highest it's ever been. The last 3 years, the figures have been unbelievable. This last year was 17.9 million lost working days attributed to work-related stress. And that was 55% of sickness absence days that were due to stress, depression and anxiety. So it is the leading cause of sickness absence. And employers do have a legal duty of care to protect employees from injury, and that includes both physical and psychosocial, so stress. And good work should at least do no harm and at best be a place of health. So what we wanted to do was take the tools that currently exist, but tweak them to suit the changes to working practices. And that's what we've done with this survey tool. So the health and safety approach requires the organisation do a risk assessment and act on the findings and then monitor progress. So it's not actually that difficult, it's not that complicated. It's as simple as using a survey, analysing the data to understand your own organisation's challenges at the present time, and then just review it regularly. And it's on the basis that if you had a physical risk that was causing people harm and injury in the workplace, then it wouldn't be enough to just let people get injured and then place a bandage on the injury. What you'd have to do is to find out what it was that was leading to the injury, and you'd have to mitigate or remove the risk. And that's what you're asked to do when it comes to occupational stress risk as well. Seek out, understand what are the things that are a risk for your staff that could cause ill health from a psychosocial perspective in the future, and take steps now to design your work around that. So the resources we've developed through this project are the qualitative report, which gives a really useful insight into the range of experiences by the staff that were participating in this project from the 4 local authorities. And it really helps you to understand the meaning of those concepts for those staff. What did that look like in reality? The working practice profiles are separate documents. They're included as appendices in the report that we separated out the content that was of relevance only to specific types of working or ways of working. And we analysed that separately from the general experiences of remote working. And what we mean by this is if somebody had a role that involved home visits, for example, and they said something in the focus groups that was relevant only to people who undertook home visits as part of their role, then that content was taken out and it was treated within the working practice profiles rather than in the main report. So the main report is about general remote working challenges, benefits, and the working practice profiles are role and work type specific. And then the survey will enable organisations to assess their current position, understand the prevalence of the issues we've found within their own organisation, and generate generalisable findings. So the next steps that we recommend, our call to action really, is that you download and use the survey tool in your own organisation. And we'd also recommend that alongside the survey tool, you also take a brief measure of health outcomes, such as the patient health questionnaire, which is just 4 questions that enable you to also assess depression and anxiety, and to use that to look at the relationship between risks and the existence of stress in your people. Segment that data, analyse it in a way that makes you able to understand where do the challenges exist within your organisation, where are things working well, are there certain departments where management training is the suitable intervention and other departments where perhaps there's something around change management that needs to be done. How best can you tailor your interventions, prioritise and use resources effectively? So our recommendation is that organisations now take these outputs and use them to understand their own organisation's position, to devise nuanced recovery plans that enable you to design good, healthy and sustainable work. And you can access our resources at our website, which is humanfactors.hull.ac.uk. And you can see there you've got the white paper report, the risk assessment tool and the risk assessment tool guidance. And the working practice profiles form part of that white paper.
Great, thanks Katie and thanks Becky. And to everyone who's on the call, we've got 5 minutes for questions now. So if you'd like to put anything that's burning into the chat, and we'll open that up to the team. I think it's just extraordinary actually to think about the number of working days that are lost as a result of stress. When I first heard that figure, 17.9 million, and that's before the pandemic. This was until I think it was the latest. The stats are up to March 2022. 17.9 million days lost, 55% of all illnesses. It's pretty extraordinary, and it's kind of concerning how that could develop. Don't want to speculate on that at the moment, though. I've got a question, I think, for you, Becky, first of all, which might be something that many people on the call are thinking about, which is actually how could you go about implementing this in your organisation, and what steps so far have Hull City Council taken to practically start having these conversations and implementing them?
I think practically for our team is we've got a programme called the Work Smart programme, which has already been looking at how we can support remote working and providing that tools and technology. And now for us, it's getting the team together and looking through these recommendations that Hull University have looked at and how we can really start putting some of these into practice, but also using the survey tool as well and the work practice profiles. We know from the ways of working have changed, and we know we need to support staff, but we also know we need to look at our property side of it, because we have got more staff working remotely, and some of these working practice profiles will really help us to understand how best we can design our properties and what properties are best to keep for the right people. So we're having the right people in the buildings rather than the building fitting the people, if that makes sense. And also we're working on the etiquette side of it, coming up with hints and tips and protocols around managing team meetings, managing training online. Because to me, some of that is about how do we keep that engagement going up, especially if you did training face-to-face, you'd be having icebreakers. We're not getting that at the moment. So how can we encourage icebreakers during training so that staff start engaging early on rather than too late in the conversation? And like we said, debriefs are so important. How can we get staff to debrief? But talk to the people you haven't seen for 2 months, because you used to see them in the kitchen and talk about football, but you don't anymore. So how can we encourage staff to still have them team briefs? So for us, I think we're already thinking about that, and we're already looking at how we can move forward and help shape some of our future working practices.
And what's been the reaction from your directors and your senior management team so far?
I think for them, they want us to look at how we can shape this going forward. And like I said, we have already got a Work Smart programme that's been in place, and they're very supportive of that, and they're very supportive of how we can further support staff through mental health, productivity within their homes, equipment. And we're just rolling out more teams and collaboration facilities, and they're really supportive of us working with teams on them discovery sessions, looking at how we can use software such as Teams to really help kind of facilitate more collaboration. So we're really supportive of it and looking at how we can kind of use some of the technologies going forward to even enhance it further.
Great. We've got a comment from Richard in the chat. Are we able to share that now, or is that something we'll be sending around afterwards? We'll definitely send it around afterwards, Richard. But yeah, okay, just invite. So any further questions from anyone who's on the call? I don't want to ask them all. I think, Katie, a question to you is, we talked about the severity of the challenge and what might have already started happening over the last 6 months and might continue to the next 6 months. What might happen if we don't talk about this and to take this more seriously at a more corporate level?
I think that the figures that we're seeing for work-related stress from 2019 to 2020 went up to March, as you quite rightly said, and they were shocking numbers. And it actually shows that over the last 3 years, it's flatlined. Stress hasn't got better in the workplace; it's got worse. And actually, over the last 3 years, it's been as bad as each year on year. It's been not very good, and a huge cost to the economy. Now, I think there would have been an assumption that people working from home may bring huge benefits, and certainly I think a lot of organisations have seen sickness absence days decrease since people have been working from home. But what's not necessarily yet understood is the impact of working, the risks. A lot of people don't like talking about risk when it comes to health and well-being. They want to talk about well-being, but you do need to understand the risks, and you need to mitigate them in order to protect people's well-being. And if organisations are not acting on that at the moment, and especially if they make assumptions that some of these benefits outweigh the potential risks through home working, then there is a long-term risk that people will become unwell through work, and it may even reach a point where it's too late for organisations to go back on the decisions that have been made that could then be causing harm. So the sort of closure of buildings and that kind of thing, it'd be very difficult to turn back on that.
Great, thank you. And so just to conclude, you did mention, I don't know if people had the chance to see this, that you're going to be running a webinar on the 8th of December. 1 p.m. How can people find out more about that and register their interest?
I think the best thing might be, because we've not set the details of the webinar up yet, but if people are interested, if you log on to the page on our website, I think it's just being shared in the chat now, and as well as being able to download the resources, there is a register your interest link as well. If you sign up for that, for the register your interest, then you can we can send the details to you about that, or alternatively you can contact myself or Fiona Earle, and you'll find our contact details on our website.
Great, and please to everyone on the call, do forward this on to the right people in your organisations as well, or others. Especially, I think this is going to be useful to HR teams, organisational development teams, corporate directors, and so on. So, yeah. Great, thank you so much, Katie and Becky. It's really interesting to hear from you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, and so we'll move on to the second presentation now. And this, as I mentioned, is around digital inclusion. We actually received 2 proposals relating to this theme back in July, back in the summer, and the teams behind these 2 bids came together to join forces, and they've actually developed an online digital inclusion toolkit. This project is led by Leeds City Council and by the London Borough of Croydon It's also supported by Age UK Croydon and Tech Resort, who are a not-for-profit based in Eastbourne. And so without any further ado, I'll pass you over to Sarah Lyles from Leeds and Will Callahan and Dave Hampton from Croydon, who are going to show you what they've been working on.
Hiya, can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Fantastic. So we're having, as a team, we're having some Teams issues today, so we'll do our best to show you what we've built. But if you can't hear any of us, just shout and we'll do our best. So I'm just going to share, to start with, a couple of slides setting out what we're all about. So can you see the slides okay?
Not yet, Will.
Oh, I think this is the Teams issues we're having. How about that? Yeah. Okay, it's been very slow.
Perfect.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. So we are, as Matt said, we're 4 organisations. So I'm from Croydon Council and Tech Resort. Dave Hampton is our expert designer. He's from Croydon, and Sarah Lyles is sort of delivery manager for the project. She's from Leeds, and I think all of us, if Teams holds out, will all say a few things today. We have a URL that you can go and visit. Not quite yet. We reckon it'll be live by the end of the day, but we're at digitalinclusionkit.org. So if you try that out, sort of 5 o'clock, it should be working. But what's the challenge here? So we've noticed in our respective organisations that digital inclusion's always been a problem. Croydon's done dedicated work on this. The Leeds City Council programme 100% Digital Leeds has spent 3 or 4 years working on this. So this has always been an issue. People not having the skills, the confidence, the motivation, the money to get online. But I think if anything, COVID's just made this a whole lot worse. You know, people really need to access services now this way, and they're disenfranchised if they can't. Matt, you mentioned about sort of 2 councils having the same idea at the same time. So I wrote a Croydon bit about this, and Jason and Sarah at Leeds was writing at the same time, and it made a lot of sense for us to put our sort of our separate thoughts together and create this bid and this project together. We've been going for about 6 sprints altogether. So the material we're going to show is the platform is largely built, but we decided that we're going to continue and add content and grow collaboration and hopefully involve a lot more people on this call and other organisations. So if there's anything here that grabs you, if there's any questions, then please do ask us. As Matt said, we are funded by the COVID-19 Challenge Fund, and it's been a massive boon for us. I don't think we would have been able to do this work without it. So thank you. And you know, why is it us 4? Well, I think we've all got a stake in it. So as I said, you know, Croydon and Leeds have been doing work on this for a long time. Age UK Croydon is one of Croydon's partners. I mean, they're on the front line with their users, and they're trying to help them out. And they've been struggling with things, particularly over COVID. So, you know, they've got a stake in this. And Tech Resort CIC, the not-for-profit that I and others founded in Eastbourne, we've been grappling with this challenge for sort of 7-8 years on the south coast. So it made sense for the 4 of us to get together and sort of pool our resources and expertise and do the best job that we can. The goals, I think, are really simple. We want something that's collaborative, a platform that you can contribute to, that you can add more content to in a modular way and more features. The playbook or the toolkit as itself needs to be a comprehensive thing. Ultimately, it needs to have lots of really good, useful information on it, and it's got to be easy to access. It's got to be accessible. It's got to be free. You know, this information's it's vital information. We need to share it as far as we can. So enough talking, really. Those are the chapter headings, but I think it's probably better if you go and look at the site and go and explore some of this stuff. But I'll hand over to Dave Hampton, who's our designer, and he's going to show you round, Dave. I'll stop sharing my screen. Hang on.
Yep. Hi everybody. Yeah, I'm Dave Hampton. I'm a interaction designer at Croydon Council, and I'm also the designer and the developer on this project. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so this is the thing. Show the thing. So the platform we settled on is WordPress. So it's built on WordPress. Some of the drivers behind that were the skill set we had in the team, and also that we needed quite a rapid turnaround. And we also liked some of the user features that WordPress has. So different authors at different levels, including contributors, admins and editors who can sort of arrange other people's content. I won't go into too much detail about design because we have limited time. I just want to sort of show some of the functionality of the site. I've actually just written a blog for 100% Digital Leads, which covers some of the design decisions and the decisions we made over the platform. So you can go and have a look at that when that comes onto 100% Digital Leads. I think it's coming on very soon.
I think I'll post a URL in the chat in a minute.
Yeah, we can
If I
post
can
a link.
go find it. Yeah.
Okay, so in terms of design, I've worked for 2 local authorities, so Brighton and Croydon. So a lot of my design is driven by kind of best practice, accessibility, and GovUK design patterns, reusing GovUK design patterns. So for the first iteration, we've got a very nice, simple design. It's all accessible. So with our, you can see there, skip to main, nice focus styles on links. So what we're doing here, we're really leading with our proposition, you know, what the thing is, use the toolkit to find and share information about tackling digital exclusion in your community. Then the next, nice clear search. So if people know what they're looking for roughly, they can come straight in and search. And then the homepage really acts as a shop window for, these are our kind of categories. And within each category, we're going to have a number of chapters. The way it works for editors is simply if they assign a chapter to a category, it all just automatically appears on this homepage. And they can also curate it into the order they want it to use. I tab through. We've got a nice clear, you know, what we want to do, and then contribution is sort of vital in this project. So we've got some nice call to actions about contribution. Let me get into showing you some of the actual how it works. So if you go into a category, you're greeted with a page that lists out all of the chapters within that category. Again, we've got nice clear call to actions about contributing. Now this is the actual chapter page. So one thing we really liked in our research phase was taken from Wikipedia, where they split read and discussion into tabs like this. So we really wanted, because some of the content can be quite long, the user to be able to tab nicely between read and discussion and not have all the comments just buried at the bottom of the page, like on a normal WordPress. And this is quite unusual, actually. I've never seen this on a WordPress website where you have your discussion and read in tabs like this. The second really nice feature is the way that the editors can add content. So they come into WordPress and they can add content into these kind of sections that have headings. Each section that they add a heading here is then automatically populated in this contents menu. So it's really nice and easy for editors. I might be able, if I have time, show you the edit screen at the end. When you scroll down through the page, your section highlights in the contents panel on the left. And we've also got this really nice anchoring and highlighting on the sections you're browsing. Yeah, so that's our chapter page. Just briefly as well, WordPress, we knew it's quite limiting on search. So typically, because it's for a blog, it will only search sort of blog post titles and blog content. So I did some customization work to improve search. So if I search for kit here, I can see it pulls in chapter titles, but it will also pull in categories, which isn't the standard WordPress functionality. The other thing I can show you is you can search for contributors. So we're going to have different level contributors, as I mentioned. It could be people just contributing at page level or creating completely their own chapters. So you can actually search by contributor. And if I click Croydon Council here, we've got a profile page for the contributor. They can put some profile information in. Contributors can actually edit their own pages, even if they can't publish posts on the site. They may be able to draft posts, but they get proofed, and then we editors publish them. Each contributor has a list of their chapters they've created underneath. And then finally, let me show you some contributor content at page level. This is a page that I've created about the theme that we've created for the project. And if you have a look at this area on the right, you can see that we can actually highlight contributed content that's by a contributor different to the author. And let me just show you how that works in the back end.
I think we should move on, Dave.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
okay,
I think
that's
so.
fine. Yeah.
If you want to stick,
Hopefully they get you good flavour anyway. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That looks amazing. Thanks ever so much. So let me sort of briefly tell you where we're heading with this now. So at the end of the day, that URL will be live, and there's content on this site already. I mean, obviously, there's a lot more content that we want to do, and as a group of councils and third sector organisations, we're going to stick together and write a lot more in the coming months. And you're all welcome to join. The users, I didn't really mention who this is even for, and I apologise for that. Just Teams issues and other things. It's really aimed at councils, third sector organisations, and digital skills partnerships who are responsible for running digital inclusion programmes. So, you know, my council in Croydon does this, and Leeds City Council does. Tech Resorts, the third sector audit, does this kind of work. So if you're in this area and you're responsible for rolling out a programme of this kind, then this really is for you. So what we're going to do next, so we're going to write more content, and there's a lot that's been drafted already that we're editing now and we're uploading over the next couple of weeks. But also we're going to continue with the user research that we've done. We've done some, but what we found largely is showing sketches of pages and chapter headings isn't really getting us a lot of good feedback, the kind of feedback that we want. So we wanted to get to this stage where there's something in front of people they can actually see, and, you know, here it is. So we'll be sending out URLs, we'll be holding sessions with some of our users to really dig into whether this is doing what it really should be doing. And if you're interested in getting involved in any of those sessions, then please do look us up. I think that's probably everything that we want to say, but, you know, it's an open collaborative platform, and we'd really like your input. So thank you for your time. If there's any questions, we'd love to hear them.
Great, thanks, Will and Dave. Yeah, please pop any questions into the chat there. Well, there's a great one right there from Mandy. Can we share with our digital partnerships and add our own content on local offers?
I think, yes, absolutely. So we had a session with, I think it was a representative of every DSP around the country, so they all know that this is happening. We showed them some basic content, but I don't think we showed them the finished thing, or the you know, is it as good as it is now. So please do share the URL when it's live. But I think also we need a section about a sort of geographical section, what's happening in your area. So Mandy, if you'd like to talk about that and what it should include, then yeah, drop us a line.
Great. And actually, is Sarah on the line here still? Because I think there's definitely a couple of questions I've got that I think Sarah's really well placed to answer, which is, I know that a lot of content has actually been developed, and really the emphasis in the last couple of sprints for the project has been to get the platform up and running. So Sarah, could you give us a bit of an overview of where things have progressed there, and maybe a bit of background in terms of the requests that the 100% Digital Leads programme receive as a kind of leading authority in this space, and in terms of the work you've been doing?
Hi, so I'm sorry, I've been having some major connection issues. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, so at the moment we're working on our content plan. So now that the development's finished, one of the next major stage of the project is to kind of curate all the information that the various partners in the project have into the kind of useful pages for the toolkit before we kind of move on to pushing it out in terms of getting more collaborative content out. Yeah, over the life of the 100% Digital Leads project, we've had a lot of interest from other local councils about how we've put together the digital inclusion project, the kind of different aspects of it, and how we run that. I think we've had interest from over 35 other local councils across the 3 years that the project's been running to the scale that it is now. A lot of those having to do with things, for example, like how we set up our tablet lending scheme, which is run by Leeds Libraries, where the 100% Digital Leads team sits and loans out iPads to third sector organisations to help them to improve their digital inclusion offer and to trial integrating digital inclusion into their services without the risk of outlaying a lot of money into investing it in technology that they maybe won't know how to use or don't know if they'll get the benefit out of. So it gives them a risk-free kind of option to trial digital inclusion, and then the ability to use that findings to write their own funding bids and hopefully invest in their own digital inclusion infrastructure. Another of the things we often get requests about is how our digital champions network works, the ways that we give training to have productive conversations about digital inclusion and discuss with organisations how to have positive conversations with their users about introducing digital and how it can benefit them, and finding the specific hooks for organisations that'll bring in their users.
Yeah, I think that starts to answer this question that we've got from Hedwig here, which was, I'm doing work around digital inclusion. How would I use it? What would I do with the toolkit? What can I take out of it? So is it content or a way to work together? And I suspect it's a bit of both, Hedwig, but I'll let one of the team members come back to you directly on that, if someone would like to.
Would you like me to, Sarah? Would you like to?
Yeah, no, that's okay. And then if I've got anything else to add.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's as Matt said. So there might be a sort of good case study that, from your existing work that you might like to add, or some tips for other people that you might like to share. So I think that's one way that you could give to the project. If if you'd be willing and able to do that, that would be fantastic. But I think also, the fact that there are a lot of organisations chipping into this, there'll be lots of tips, advice, best practice from other organisations. So if you're thinking, well, I need to implement, I don't know, a tablet lending scheme, you may well have already done that. But if, let's say you haven't, for the sake of argument, you'll be able to read how Leeds did it, how Croydon's doing it, how Tech Resort has done it. And that might be food for thought. That might be something that would help you sort of move forward with your work more quickly. So I think it's reading and sharing best practice advice about this is the main thing we see. But I think there's perhaps more to it. We were talking today around, could this be more of a community around this kind of work? So, could we have sessions where we talk about a particular issue that is troubling us? I think we need to start with this, but we're sort of quite interested in talking to people about where it could go. So, yeah.
And I think a question from Elizabeth is really nailed actually where we all started from in this conversation, which is what does one authoritative toolkit for local authorities and for other place-based agencies, voluntary service organisations and so on, look like, and how can that also be a collaborative or enabled by a collaborative platform. Those have been the two main things. So this is where we've got to so far after a couple of months of work. It's going to be really exciting to see where it goes next. Would anyone like to just outline the next step and how anyone could get involved in this going forwards?
Yeah, I can again. So the URL will be live around 5 o'clock. So digitalinclusionkit.org. You can contact us through that. We're having a launch for the project. I think it's first, second week in December. So if you're interested in coming to that and seeing a product that's more finished, that has more content, you'd be very welcome to attend. But you could email Sarah or myself. We'll provide our email addresses if you want to talk about specific ideas. You know, we're very open for a chat.
Great. Right, thank you. And we will be sending out further information with those links, especially after this event. So we've kind of run out of time for more questions on this at the moment. But yeah, thanks, Sarah, Will, and Dave for your time today and for taking us through the platform.
Thank you.
No problem. Thanks.
Great, and so I'm just going to take you through some other project updates. As I mentioned, there are two other things that loosely fit within this theme around guidance that we're working on. The first thing is something that a host of councils are working together on, which is a guide for community engagement. Here you can see the extent of the list of partners that are involved in this. So it's quite a big piece of work, as you can see. And so we're going to be sharing the outcomes of this project at a showcase similar to this in the new year. A second project, though, is on digital place-based engagement, and Richard Limbrick's on the call, so I'd like to invite you, Richard, who's from Camden Council, to tell you a bit more about what he's working on.
Hi, everyone. Can I? Do you mind if I share my screen and I can?
Yeah, go for it.
Hopefully, see if I can get a few slides up quickly. We'd had a bid to have a look at digital place-based engagement. So this is around. So I'm a planner. I work in Camden Planning Department, and I work in Development Management Service. So that's for the area of planning, which is related to planning applications, basically. But planning is quite a big process, and it starts all the way from kind of plan making and how we make our policies in the first place, and there's engagement all the way through that. And we'd always found that there were barriers to that. So we put in a bid to work on, in particular, trying to digitize a lot of those types of engagement. So we'd come quite far actually in a couple of areas of engagement. Although we'd recognise lots of barriers, we'd put in place quite a few areas of engagement in Camden. And obviously COVID put a bit of a stop to a lot of those, because they tended to be the most effective ones we found tended to be like face-to-face events. And that was a big problem for us. So we started trying to adapt and digitize those, and we felt that what would be really useful was to kind of share that knowledge and try and get it all down in one place. So very similar to the kind of idea behind the driving principles behind the project you've just heard from, like trying to create that central resource. And in digitizing it, in fact, we were working with a lot of other local authorities trying to share knowledge when we're trying to adapt very quickly, in particular because we had ongoing council meetings. It was statutory meetings like planning committees, and trying to get those all back online. We had to sort of wait for the government to change legislation so they could happen digitally. And then as soon as that happened, we were able to go live. So we did a lot of work behind the scenes, so we were ready to go straight away as soon as the legislation was changed by central government. But this just shows you this key problem, and we'd identified this actually before COVID, that there is what are these barriers, and in terms of getting people involved in the planning process. So we'd started to do a lot of work on that, try and understand, and partly a lot of that was around inclusion as well, making sure a wider representation of people. And indeed, as part of the project for this, as we've been going through, we've been looking at kind of demographics and things like that, and looking at who engages with the planning process. And it's probably certainly no surprise to anyone involved in planning, but it probably won't be much of a surprise to any of you either. that it's white people who are between the ages of 45 and 60, basically. Everyone else tends to be underrepresented quite significantly. So the first challenge for us was trying to go, okay, well, how do we transfer over to digital platforms? What do we do on that? And we did a lot of work. We had to do so immediately lots of local authorities started collaborating, sort of just because planning is quite a small world. Everyone knows each other in planning. Everyone's about 2 people removed. So we were all jumping on, kind of saying, how are you going to run it? What are you going to do? What are the most important things? Are you going to allow public speaking, like live public speaking in it, or is it just going to be broadcast, and all of these issues? So we had to kind of shape that, and we did it quite collaboratively. But again, we found that none of this stuff was sort of being written down, and actually we've continued to learn from it. So the project that we've been doing is trying to sort of garner that together, all that information, bring it together and look at, firstly, sort of resources, platforms and tools and things, but as a secondary thing, really. But understanding what you can do, how you can run some kind of digital engagement platform, and there are different types of engagement platform, how you can do that to be as effective as possible in a digital environment. And we looked at the not only the sort of challenges to that live public participation, like I say, planning committee. It was our first official council meeting was our planning committee. So we were our team's public meeting was the first council public meeting in Camden, which was done digitally as soon as the legislation was changed. So we were sort of like the forerunner of it, and we were the test run, and it went surprisingly well. It went, and we've continued to sort of adapt it and tweak it slightly, but we've always had full public participation in it. But we also realised there were these opportunities actually moving to digital, that going back to that original problem statement, which has just been sort of highlighted by COVID, really, was actually there are opportunities here with digital to kind of improve publicising these kinds of engagement events, thinking about what information we collect. So how do we collect that information? There's a big drive to try and move from documents to data in planning, and actually we could do that in the engagement world too, meaning it's a bit easier to aggregate that information, thinking about what we're asking people, and also make it spatial. So looking at maps, for example, rather than getting a letter through your door telling you about something, you have to go and work out where the site is, and then which it might just be a neighbour, and then that's it, really. You don't really get much of engagement from there. Well, there's an opportunity to make this much more visual, much more map based, and also macro to micro engagement. So there's this opportunity to try and allow people to have like light touch engagement, because I think one thing you get is the people who engage, that demographic who engages, they tend to engage fairly uniformly in a certain way, which is writing a big long letter of objection. You don't tend to get a lot of support for things. It's not very balanced, and also if people just want to give really light touch comments, there's not much of an opportunity to do that, and actually digital platforms provided us with that opportunity to do it. So we started looking at all the different points of engagement, and this is what I say about the planning process. So I sit sort of in this area here of planning, which is from pre-application, application, and delivery. All of this is from monitoring, so seeing what's being built, when is it being built, making plans around that, developing our plans and policies, providing guidance for those, building up more detailed area frameworks and allocated sites, and then applications come forward from that. So there are engagement points all here, and what happens is currently, even as we've shifted to digital, these will happen in silos individually. This is the point around, if we think about more how we collect the information, can we actually collect it in a more standardized way across all these different things and start to share the information across it? So when I'm looking at an application here, can I find out what information we received from engagement on our initial plan making stage or our area framework that could be relevant to inform our decisions on this, to make it a lot more sort of front loaded and more participatory for residents? And this idea came, well, actually, if we did this, we can use this opportunity to advertising it. If we think about how we collect the information as well as just looking at the platforms and things, and we think actually maybe we can run it in a certain way which has a longer term view, we can stop putting these in silos and of engagement. We can create a wider profile, like a live, continuous consultation and view of what a community wants, feels, what their aspirations are for their area, which can then inform all of our decision making. I'm going to just hand over to my colleague now, Jono, who's going to kind of take this forward onto one of the other big strands of the project that we're currently working on.
Thanks, Rich. So my name is Jonathan McLuhan. I'm a planning officer as well at Camden Council. So all these problems Rich has set out in the digital playbook kind of lead to the next part of our project, which is to create a digital site notice. So we all know that traditional site notices are tied onto a tree or to some railings, and they're very kind of static. So we're looking at developing a digital twin. We see it as kind of a failure in our current approach. So it would be an online version of a digital site notice, and then we're looking at as well improving the physical site notice itself. So can it be more attractive, and how do you interact with it? So at the moment, when you either have to go to a link that's on the site notice or go through a QR code, and you get taken to a website which is loaded with PDF. So how do we create an environment which is a bit richer and more linked? So create data that's accessible and open, and how do we collect data from people as well? And as Rich was saying, this is across a planning service, so digital site notices from plan making stage, from consultation, from frameworks, if councils are doing their own kind of regeneration schemes and setting up citizens assemblies, right through to pre-applications and applications and planning appeals. We want to roll out a site notice, so that's a key part of our process. At the moment, we've got something called electronic alerts or e-alerts, and the e-alerts have basically replaced letters. We don't send letters anymore, and so people can subscribe to these email alerts which come out and alert them whenever an application is in their area, and they can kind of synchronize that to specific development types. So Rich has skipped to the last page. Here we go. Brilliant. So what we've done so far, so we're developing our digital playbook. At the moment, we're focused on the content of what's going to be in that playbook rather than rolling out a kind of end product, which we're working on. So we've reviewed all the current tools and platforms that are in planning. So using things like Commonplace, we've used at plan making stage. I know there's a lot of other programs out there like Citizen Lab, and people have used Zoom and MS Teams for their public engagement events. So we've been doing a lot of background work, and on the digital site notice, this is something we're going to build with a development partner, and we're going to use a test that. So we want to use a test that with people who will be interacting with site notices, and it's potentially, we want to create a prototype that's rolled out across the country and becomes almost a template new site notice that everyone will be using. So the next slide is basically our call to action. So we really want some help. So our next step is we've got our engagement, our digital development partner for the site notice. So we're going to start working with them. That's kicking off next week. So it's a very exciting time for us. But we also want more feedback from everyone out there. So we're going to send out some surveys next week, and we're also going to send out our digital playbook already, and we're going to have a tab so people can add the tools and different processes others are using. So we really want feedback from you and want some user testing on our playbook and also in our site notice. We also have sprint meetings every 2 weeks, and we have shows and tell, and anyone's welcome to those. So please come along, get in touch with us if you want to join and share what's happening in your borough, or if you want to learn more about what we're doing. So anyone can come along. The next one's on Monday, and they're every 2 weeks. And on the final slide, I want to quickly show you the various channels we've had. So we've got a dedicated planning inbox, we've got a Twitter page, we've got a Medium channel where we write our sprint notes, and we also write blogs. On our YouTube channel, we share our sprint meetings, so we kind of upload our live meetings. We've also got a LinkedIn group, and we've got a project website through MHCLG, so we can share those links with you. But our next phase in our program is really connecting with everyone and getting as much input as we can and kind of sharing experiences and collaborating.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Jonathan and Richard. I mean, plenty of ways to keep in touch with this project by the looks of it, and I hope that anyone on the line is able to do that. This is kind of a status update from you, really, because I think we're expecting to see more sort of refined, showcased outcomes in the new year sometime. So we really look forward to seeing how this progresses. And yeah, to everyone watching, please get in touch with the team. This, like the other projects, will be circulating further information in an email after this event with the links to those sorts of things and where you can find out more. So that more or less brings us to the end of the event here. So just to really wrap up, I mean, I'll start by saying thank you to everyone who's attended and to all of the speakers today. We'll be also making the recording available shortly after, so that will be on YouTube, and in the email we'll point the link towards that in case you want to share it amongst any of your colleagues. We're also going to be running 2 more showcase events in the coming weeks. And as I mentioned earlier, we funded 12 projects in total, and you've heard a kind of a window into how 4 of them have been going so far. So there's 2 specific ones coming up. So on 3rd of December, in a couple of weeks' time, we're going to hear from a series of projects that are aiming to improve data sharing and insights for COVID-19 response by focusing on different challenges in that space. And then the week after that, which is 10th of December, we've got 2 projects that have been developing tools to help residents maintain social distancing in busy locations. So we hope to see many of you again for those events. And if you found this event useful, then please also pass on the links to those future events to your colleagues who are working in the relevant areas. And then last just remains for me to say thanks again for joining us. Look out for that email with the links to other things. And that should be out with you by the end of today and certainly by the end of the week. So once again, thank you very much for joining us.